Hello, my name is Dan Wigodsky. I'm an architect and a docent here at the McNay Art Museum in San Antonio. It is my pleasure to bring you on this journey of discovering the sculptural forms and craftsman details of what was originally the home of the artist and art collector Marion Koogler McNay. Marion Koogler McNay moved to San Antonio in 1926. Shortly thereafter, she married her second husband, Dr. Donald Atkinson. They owned a 132-acre goat farm on the then undeveloped north side of San Antonio. They both agreed that they wanted to build there the finest house in San Antonio. Since Mrs. McNay was both an artist and an art collector, this meant that the house would not only be spacious, but that every surface would be carefully decorated, including custom tiles for the floors, painted ceiling stencils, textured stucco walls, and custom-crafted light fixtures and window grills. Every room and detail were overseen by Mrs. McNay. The house was completed in August 1929. On March 2, 1942, Mrs. McNay had an epiphany to leave her house and her art collection as the first modern art museum in Texas. The style of the house is called Mediterranean, or often Spanish colonial-revival, typically with thick white stucco walls and red tile roof. The architects were the well-known local father and son team, Atlee B. Ayers and Robert M. Ayers, who were well educated in historical Mexican and Spanish architecture. Mrs. McNay passed away in 1950 with her home, 700 works of art, the surrounding 23 acres, and an endowment becoming the museum. The museum opened in 1954 after renovations that had been specified by Mrs. McNay before her death and were fortunately carried out by the original architects. Within the original 132 acres, why is the house located where it is? The house is at the southwest corner of the property, at the top of where the ground rises on two sides and adjacent to the street called the Austin Highway. The house extends west to east to catch the predominant southeast breeze from the distant Gulf of Mexico. Sitting up high, the house is very visible from the street nearby. The Austin Highway was just that, the highway from San Antonio to Austin. So amidst the surrounding farms, the house in reality was the gatehouse to and from San Antonio to Austin. The property is located near the beginning of the highway at a special place where pretty much the biggest curve and the highest rise in the entire length of the highway occur. From here, it was a straight shot to Austin. Mrs. McNay wanted to show off her house, and she wanted to make it inviting to anyone who wanted to see it. Guests were always welcome. This welcome continues today as the public museum, and also with extended hours for the beautifully landscaped grounds, which are a frequent location for wedding photos, picnics, and walks amongst the sculptures. The three-story tower in the corner is a tall marker as a focus of the location of the front door. The tower is centered on the nearby street intersection for visibility from a distance. The turn-in from the street itself onto the property is also centered on the tower. The house is a five-sided U-shape. Each side contains a single major room. The house is like a chain of individual major rooms connected in sequence, one to the other. Each room has a shape of its own, giving each room an individual character both on the inside and recognizable on the outside. The front of the house could have been completely flat on the exterior, but the architects chose to project forward the individual room shapes, making an irregular profile. This does make the house more interesting as well as more inviting. To the right of the entry tower was the library with projecting porch on the first floor and Mrs. McNay's bedroom and balcony on the second floor. The octagonal entry tower projects forward in front of the reception hall. To the left of the entry tower was the dining room with a projecting roof over the steps down to the outside dining patio. What cannot be seen from the front of the house is that the decision was obviously made early on that the house would surround a courtyard. The house itself is stretched around the west end of the courtyard. Mrs. McNay presumably wanted a larger courtyard than the length of the house could surround, so the courtyard was extended to the east and enclosed at that end by a tall freestanding wall. The courtyard gives a private interior focus to the house, which was especially important given the surrounding goat farm and the desire for some privacy in a public setting. The courtyard also creates a cooling microclimate. In order to make the house as cool as possible, it is only one room deep, so that the breeze can blow as freely as possible through the house. This also stretched the house as long as possible to enclose as much of the courtyard as possible. Note the 3-story octagonal entry tower. The 3rd floor was an open observation room, the 2nd floor was the study, and the 1st floor has the front door and reception hall. The walk from the drop-off at the driveway to the front door is a choreographed path. First, the walk does not center or point directly to the front door. Instead, it looks straight ahead into space beyond the front of the house. To get to the front door, you go straight, then turn right, turn left, and turn right. The steps even get higher, making the approach more distinct. The porch in front of the door is very small, and the front door is tiny. The architects wanted the front door and the interior to be discovered. They did not want a grand outside stair leading to a huge front door. They wanted you to be gradually squeezed from the open outdoors through the narrow doorway and then spring open into the interior grand reception hall. Craft in multiple varieties is on every surface of the entire house. It is truly an artist's house. The exterior stucco is rough. Originally, the architects wanted it smoother, but Mrs. McNay wanted it rough. When she didn't get her way in the beginning, she, quote, took to her bed. But she was right. Look how the stucco walls form an overall composition with the window grills and other details. If the wall had been smoother, the window projections and grills, light fixtures, and other decoration would have looked like they were floating on the wall. If you look closely at the window grills, you can see that they are almost all different. Mrs. McNay used every detail and surface as an opportunity to show off an artistic flair using local craft. She may have even designed the grills herself. The wainscot just to the right of the front door at the bottom of the wall looks like tile, but is actually carved plaster. On the wall, just to either side of the front door, are custom light sconces, adding to the artistic feeling of care and craft. There are over 25 differently designed light fixtures made by local craftsmen in the house. The arch form over the door is the only arch on this facet of the house. As you approach the front door, there is more detail, and the detail gets more open. Around the arch are cast plaster forms. The carving over the door is partially open, and the metal front gates are almost completely open. Before going inside, look up at the colored tiles below the window balcony above, and at the 4 metal serpents with their tongues extended that help to hold it up. Their bodies swell and contract as they curve around into support brackets. Also notice the flat wall at the entrance that makes a transition from the exterior detail to the interior detail. Mrs. McNay obviously wanted a spacious, symmetrical reception hall with a grand double stair. In addition to receiving visitors, she used this space for group receptions and parties. Centered on axis with the front door on the opposite side of the room are doors into the courtyard beyond, allowing light into the reception hall. This view serves as an introduction to that central, important space. The wood beam ceiling is stenciled. Mrs. McNay may have designed and cut out the stencils and painted the images herself. The wood beams are actually false. Inside of them are steel beams. Remember the octagonal entry tower on the outside? The 3rd floor and 2nd floor rooms are octagonal, but the outside shape doesn't reach down into the 1st floor. The steel beams are there to hold up all of that weight above in order to make a larger and more open reception hall. It seems like Mrs. McNay wanted the large hall and was unconcerned that the octagonal tower shape did not reach the ground. The 2 columns on either side of the main entrance actually hold up the ends of 2 of the steel ceiling beams. The craftsman tile floor is from different sources around the country. The small tiles with figures of animals and trees are from the Moravian Tile Works in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. The floor tile pattern looks random, but there is, in fact, a repeating pattern. Look for it. An in-depth look at the extensive tile in the entire house is left for further study. The central chandelier was built in 1997. Although it is newer, the hummingbirds, peacocks, and horse metal castings work perfectly with the house. It might be noted that there is no living room in this house. It really is a party house. Mrs. McNay loved to have visitors and to show off the house and her collection. Turning to the left or west from the front door, you enter the dining room. The coffered ceiling is also stenciled. Note that every other coffer has an image of a peacock. Traditionally, the peacock represents spirituality, resurrection, and long life. The existing iron gates with a peacock image that are currently at the west door opening were originally gates in the doorway from the reception hall into the dining room. The gates made a special themed entry into the dining room. The peacock motif is frequent in the house. Mrs. McNay even had live peacocks roaming the grounds. More craftsman floor tiles are here in different shapes and images than in the other rooms. The doors to the right are centered on the long axis of the courtyard. At the far end of the courtyard, hanging from the original freestanding wall, was a fountain. Slightly closer is the still existing Lion's Head fountain. This fountain feeds a narrow stream in the patio floor, which empties into the central fountain. Closer still, the existing 8-sided planter was a fountain. In line, then, is the dining room. The doors to the left of the dining room open onto steps down to what was a patio with another 8-sided fountain. And below that was a double stair with a stone cave-like grotto with dripping water into a small pool in the center at the bottom. The view to the left is to the west. It is clear that Mrs. McNay wanted to be seated at the dinner table with guests, viewing the setting sun in one direction and enjoying the color reflected from the water of the fountains, the stucco walls, and the plants in the courtyard centered in the other direction. The property was appropriately named Sunset Hills. To the left or west of the dining room and down the original steps is the brown sculpture pavilion, followed by the brown gallery. They were built together in 1970. They were the first larger room additions to the original house for the museum. The pavilion is mostly glass with wood framing. The pavilion is in scale with the original house and serves as a delicate transition from the architecture of the house to the larger gallery. In the pavilion are exhibited sculpture and glass objects which will not deteriorate in the sunshine. The larger gallery is a square rotated 45 degrees from the grid of the pavilion, reflecting the adjacent line of the house. The 18-foot-high ceiling in the gallery was to accommodate large art and to serve at the time as a multi-use program facility for meetings, presentations, and receptions. The wood floor has dividing wood strips in a square pattern which reflect the wood beams of the ceiling. Note the beautiful large carved wooden doors at both ends of the gallery. This wing contains the theater arts book collection of the donor Robert Tobin at either end, while the central area is used for theater-related exhibitions. It was completed in 1984. There are 3 built-in seats at the landing of the stair near the top of the main stairs. There's a window above each seat. The center window can open while the 2 side windows are fixed. There's a middle grille outside of the center operable window. The tile on these seats is Moorish and is the only place that these are used in the house. The tile at the face of the wall under the center seat extends down close to the floor to mark it as special. At the very top of the stairs, the columns form a colonnade. The arched vaulted ceiling of the colonnade is painted blue, representing the sky. The ceiling above the main stair is also painted sky blue. The 2 windows with decorative grilles on the east and west sides of the stair give the impression of being exterior windows. The colonnade, the stair, and the 2 windows on either side of the stair apparently reference outdoor spaces similar to traditional open-air Mexican and Moorish colonnades around a courtyard. In fact, the arched ceiling areas between the wood beams in the ceiling of the reception hall are also blue, as is the arched vaulted ceiling above the 2 columns on either side of the front door. It appears that the entire reception hall and stair were visualized as both an indoor foyer and as an outdoor airspace as an extension of the main courtyard. At the landing, the window on the west wall was open into a small hallway on the second floor. The window on the east wall was solid and placed there for symmetry. Standing at the landing, you can see both down into the reception hall and up to the second floor. On the second floor, there is all of the weight of the columns and walls, as well as the weight of the octagonal third floor observation room above. Since the reception hall is wide open, it is most apparent from here that all of this weight must be carried on the structure contained within the second floor itself. It is also clear that the octagonal shape of the second floor study does not extend down into the first floor. As noted earlier, the wood beams in the ceiling of the first floor are all false. The deepest beam, expanding east and west, contains a 20-inch steel beam, while the 4 other shallower beams each contain a 12-inch steel beam. 2 columns on either side of the front door hold up the ends of 2 of these steel beams. The columns on the second floor walkway are actually the beginning of a continuous colonnade from here to the exterior second floor walkway around the courtyard, and then to what was Mrs. McNay's studio on the second floor on the north side of the courtyard. Moving upstairs is the octagonal room that was originally the study in the private second floor of the house. This area is labeled guest bedroom on the original drawings. However, it is one of the few rooms in the house that did not have flow-through outside air. It did have a bathroom attached. The bathroom was open to the bedroom, but also opened directly into Mrs. McNay's bedroom. It's hard to know for whom this room was intended, or even if Mrs. McNay used it as a more private room for herself in the winter. Mrs. McNay's bedroom had balconies on both sides to maximize the breeze, as well as the views to the city to the south in the distance and to the courtyard to the north. Note that access to the balconies meant that there could be doors which allowed more area than windows for the breeze to blow through. An original fireplace on the north wall of the bedroom was deleted in 1954 to make more wall hanging space. Looking beyond the bedroom to the east, the next space was the sleeping porch and main bath. Beyond that was an outside door leading to an open-air roof patio. On the courtyard side of the patio is the exterior stairs that gave private access for Mrs. McNay directly to the courtyard. The patio was enclosed to make additional art gallery space in the 1954 conversion to the museum. The current Oppenheimer I gallery was originally trunk storage and a bathroom, serving a bedroom in Oppenheimer II. Oppenheimer III was originally a roof, since there wasn't another space required in the house on the second floor. The Oppenheimer III enclosed gallery space was constructed in the 1954 conversion to the museum. The colonnade outside of the galleries provided a connection for Mrs. McNay from her bedroom to her studio on the second floor on the opposite side of the courtyard. The columns and wooden roof structure of this colonnade were kept in the 1954 edition and can still be seen at the exterior second floor walkway. Access to the colonnade was through a short hallway, which is to the right just inside the door into Oppenheimer I. The hallway still exists, but it is currently behind a stained glass panel which is lit from behind by the outside light into the hallway. In order to make this hallway feel more open, there was a window there looking down onto the main stairs below. The window is visible from the stairs, but is now closed off from behind. A matching window, which was originally closed from behind, is on the opposite side of the stairs for symmetry only. Note the carved wood sills at both windows. The view of the courtyard shows its private nature and the sequence of fountains. You can see the entire house, as well as the additions that were made in the 70s, enclosing the far east end of the courtyard with new gallery additions. Continue around the open colonnade to the north, to the open stairs from the colonnade walkway down to the first level. As described for the dining room above, the focus of the house is the courtyard. It serves as a natural environment to view and experience, as well as aiding in the free flow of breeze cooling the house, and as a microclimate of cooling through the continuous line of fountains. Originally, there was a fountain on the far east end on the freestanding wall around that end of the courtyard. Moving west down the center of the courtyard, there is the existing Lion's Head fountain, which feeds a linear stream in the patio floor, which then feeds the main central fountain. Continuing farther west, the existing octagonal planter was a fountain. On axis then is the dining room, which doors on both sides would be thrown open on a nice day, allowing a view straight through. Beyond that was another fountain in a dining patio, and finally beyond was a double stair with a stone grotto nestled underneath, with dripping water into a small pool, water plants, and carved stone resembling a cave. The focus of the house is the courtyard, and the focus of the courtyard is water. Each facet of the courtyard has a story to tell. In the courtyard, if you're facing the dining room, on the left or southeast end of the original house is a one-story gallery now called Zilker. It was added to the house as a kitchen and breakfast area for what was the adjacent apartment sometime after the 1929 completion of the main house. You can still see where the original windows were filled in with stucco. Next, going clockwise, is the exterior stair. Again, this originally connected an outdoor patio on the second floor just off of Mrs. McNay's bedroom directly to the courtyard below. This second floor patio was enclosed in 1954 for more gallery space. You can still see the joint in the stucco where the enclosure was made. At the top of the stairs currently is an enclosed space with a door that was an elevator added late in 1954. The elevator was taken out in 2001 when another elevator was added in the front of the house. Halfway up the stair is what looks like a small walk-off balcony, which you cannot walk off onto now. However, you could originally. What happened was that the outdoor second floor patio was 2 steps down from the second floor of the main house. So when the patio was enclosed, the floor of the patio needed to be raised. This required 2 additional steps on the outdoor stairway. New stairs were built on top of the upper run of stairs and then extended 2 additional steps over the landing in the middle, cutting off access to the walk-off balcony. The door underneath the stairs was originally a window, but was made into a door in 1954 for access to the first floor of the elevator. Farther around clockwise, near the bell on the wall, were 4 original windows. These were filled in to make more wall space on the inside to hang art. You can still see where 3 of the windows were filled in on the outside. The 4th window was left on the outside, but it does not exist on the inside. Farther around clockwise is the balcony of Mrs. McNay's bedroom on the 2nd floor. Again, the doors leading to the balcony allow more area for the breeze than windows would, so the balcony serves a dual purpose of a pleasant place to sit and for air circulation. On the 1st floor is the library with the exterior fireplace and the Don Quixote tile mural above. This length of house lines up with and is exactly the same length as the wall area on the opposite side of the courtyard. This gives a regularity to the space. At this opposite north wall was the wide entry to the courtyard from the parking area beyond on the 1st floor, and an open walkway on the 2nd floor. So you could, in fact, look straight out of the bedroom or library, across the courtyard, through the open north area, and out to the farm beyond. The next wall around clockwise is the entry to the reception hall on the 1st floor. Notice how the doors are recessed, making a shallow porch outside. Above the shallow porch are sloping ceilings, which are the underside of the grand stair inside. The ceiling is painted blue to try to fool birds and bees that this is sky and not a ceiling, and not a place to build a nest. Above this are the windows at the intermediate landing of the main stairs. High above this section is the answer to the question, why is the front octagonal tower the height that it is? If you look carefully, you can see that the roof above the reception hall continues at the same slope to make the back roof over the front octagonal tower. This continuous roof set the height of the tower. If the roof over the octagonal tower had been higher, there would have been a vertical wall in the back instead of just the roof. This wall would have been hard to build and hard to keep clean. The next wall clockwise is another shallow porch on the first floor, which is outside the dining room, and an open walkway on the second floor. The wall lengths of the 3 shallow porches at this end of the courtyard are equal in length. From here you can see how the fountains made a line down the courtyard, through the dining room on axis, and out to the fountains beyond. The front of the second floor walkway has decorated columns which are close together and tile penetrations through the wall. All of this is to add decoration to the important central axial view of the house from the courtyard. The next wall clockwise is the 3rd shallow porch, which is outside of the kitchen on the first floor and more of the exterior walkway on the second floor. The space behind the second floor walkway section was originally a flat roof. This was also enclosed in 1954 to make the Oppenheimer III gallery. In 2001, new ductwork was added on the roof of this gallery, which might potentially have been seen from the courtyard. So a higher extension of the lower roof was constructed to hide it, and you can see this newer roof up above from the courtyard. The next wall clockwise was the wide access from the parking area into the courtyard on the first floor, and an extension of the open walkway on the second floor. The final wall of the original house, moving around clockwise, was the garage on the first floor with the peacock tile mural, and Mrs. McNay's studio on the second floor with a decorative iron balcony. If you compare the height of this balcony with the balcony on the opposite side, outside of Mrs. McNay's bedroom, you will see that the studio balcony is several feet lower. In order to give the studio a taller ceiling, there's a short stair inside of the studio. The garage ceiling was then made lower. In the 2 windows to the right of the studio balcony are leaded glass panels depicting the Virgin Mary and Jesus on the right and what might be St. Anthony on the horseback to the left. Mrs. McNay funded a local church, naming it St. Anthony de Padua, so this was obviously a personal theme. On either side of the balcony are custom light sconces with colored glass. Note that they are different from each other. There are over 20 different custom-designed light fixtures in the courtyard. There are even 6 different brick paving patterns in the courtyard. Again, craft and variety are everywhere. Note that there is no rain gutter at the edge of the tile roofs. The gutter is recessed back slightly within the roof so that the attractive tile ends could be exposed. Note that the overall courtyard shape is symmetrical. The west end has the 5-sided shape of the house, and the east end has the same 5-sided shape. The central fountain is centered within this symmetry. Oddly, however, there is not a part of the house that is centered on the fountain in the north-south direction. In total, it is important to recognize that the outside of the house is irregular, as discussed before, with major rooms making projections out from the flat part of the wall, while the courtyard walls generally make a smooth, continuous surface and a shape that is symmetrical. This was clearly a major design direction established by Mrs. McNay and the architects. The interior of the original library had a fireplace and mantel on the wall on the courtyard side as the focus of the room. It was deleted in 1954 to provide more wall space. The beam ceiling is again stenciled, and the wood beams are false, hiding steel beams. The tile floor is different again than the other tile floors. In the smaller floor tiles with animal and plant images, there is one rabbit that kids like to search for. There are exterior porches on both sides of the room to provide seating areas and doors for the breeze to flow through. The central doorway on the east side of the library leads to what originally was an apartment. The front section was a sitting area, and the back part was a bedroom and bath. The apartment is shifted to the left off-axis of the library, giving at least a minimal sense of separation and privacy. There was a fireplace and wall separating the 2 spaces, and the fireplace still exists underneath the wall space in the middle. The fireplace was structural, helping to hold up the second floor, and could not be deleted. so was covered over for additional wall space. The shift of the apartment in plan is made obvious since the central fireplace does not center in the library doorway. The two short steps leading up to the original sitting room also give some additional limited sense of private separation from the library vertically. It's interesting that these two small steps establish the floor elevation of all of the future museum additions. Beyond these two apartment spaces was a kitchen and breakfast area, which were added at some time with an exterior door so that someone staying in the apartment would not have to go through the main house. This apartment was probably for art teachers, other artists, or other visitors who were best located on the first floor rather than on the private second floor. These galleries were added in 1973 to accommodate larger modern works. The galleries are separated at the corner by a glass knuckle, giving views to the outside in the front and to the courtyard on the back. This glass corner divides the mass of the building into two parts, giving a somewhat smaller scale to the additions, making them a little more like the scale of the house. The exterior material is smoother stucco than the house in order to clearly differentiate them. The shape of the courtyard side was kept exactly the same as the original freestanding wall, so the original trellis there was taken down during construction and was reinstalled afterwards. Added in 1975, these galleries completed the continuous walking circuit around the courtyard. The corner connector to the large Lang gallery was a glass knuckle, symmetrical with the opposite side. Built in 1982, this gallery and attached storage area are for the exhibition of prints. Freestanding triangular walled forms can be moved to reconfigure the room as desired for different shows. The connector to the Frost galleries is glass with 6 steel columns to make a clearly defined transition. This gallery was originally the garage of the house. It was converted by Mrs. McNay to a New Mexico gallery for her artifacts. 2 fireplaces were added for the gallery, but were then removed in 1954. Named for the first director of the museum, the Leeper Auditorium and octagonal foyer provide space for temporary art exhibits, social events, lectures, concerts, and video screenings. Built in 2008, the 45,000 square foot Steeren Center contains a number of different spaces. The main large space was created for open, flexible gallery space for major exhibitions. Adjacent is a sculpture gallery. In the sculpture gallery are large windows looking outside into partially enclosed landscaped areas, which are room-like and contain additional sculpture. Finishes include green stone floors and walls made of Chinese Luoyang granite. Wood floors are Indonesian merbau. The large glass windows in the sculpture gallery were made in China since they are larger than those that were available in the US. The ceiling roof assembly has numerous layers to control the daylight with multiple options of light levels. From the bottom to the top, the layers include 3 layers of glass pressed together with different patterns on the surfaces. Then above are 2 sets of horizontal sunscreens, then a translucent glass shed roof, and finally solid aluminum louvers on the top. There are other spaces on the lower level of the building containing additional galleries, a 200-seat tiered lecture hall, and classrooms for the museum's many educational programs. Overall, it is noted that there are both traditional and modern types of spaces in the museum. The spaces in the original house and earlier additions can be categorized as traditional, with individual rooms, which are more like boxes that have corners. Here, the outside space and the inside space are felt as separate and different. The Steeren Center is modern space, where the outside space and the inside space flow into each other and feel the same. The large glass windows allow this continuous flow of space from outside to inside, and the freestanding walls at the entrance and site walls are like thin planes, creating spatial divisions without making individual contained rooms. Thank you for joining me to see the architecture of the McNay Art Museum here in San Antonio. And we do hope that you'll come in person to see not only the architecture, but the art.